Hello and welcome to Chakra News, our special podcast series tracking India-Pakistan tensions. And I'm coming to you here from our new podcast studio. Today is Budh Purnima, very auspicious day. I'm going to be talking to my friend Colonel Anurag Avasthi about India-Pakistan tensions post Op Sindoor and what India achieved from Operation Sindoor. Victory, success, or a ceasefire. Colonel Avasthi, welcome to Chakra News.
Thank you, Sandeep. The Buddha has smiled again.
The Buddha is smiling indeed, the nuclear question, which we will come to later. But first, Colonel Avasthi, the takeaways from Operation Sindoor. We saw that unprecedented tri-services briefing talking about how many bases we hit in Pakistan. Break it down for us. What are the 5 big takeaways, according to you, from Operation Sindoor?
Right, Sandeep. Let me start with the basic of the ceasefire. What people are talking about. Firstly, it is not a ceasefire. It is an arrangement.
Yeah.
It's not an agreement.
Right.
So ceasefires and armistices are written. They are absolutely documented. This is an arrangement. So make no mistake that if somebody still tries to climb up the escalatory ladder, then India will give a punitive response, as has been spoken very clearly in the DGMO's briefing yesterday. That is one. Now, when you look at the entire prognosis of Operation Sindoor, I think I would break it down into 5 very simple things. It was great daring.
Right.
It was precise. It gave a strategic message. In addition to the strategic message, it did not climb a ladder which could have been reckless. And the last part is it has given Pakistan and all the countries in vicinity an understanding that India will not tolerate terrorism. This is to start.
And also will not hesitate to use force to tackle terrorism. We'll come to that a little while later. But, let's, for the benefit of our viewers, give them an idea of the timelines over here. Let's start from the beginning. So, Pahalgam is the beginning. April 22nd, that horrific massacre of tourists in Kashmir from all parts of the country. 25 Indian tourists and 1 Nepalese national were segregated on the basis of religion, and they were gunned down, point blank range. And then the government of India starts to plan Operation Sindoor, and it strikes its first blows on the 6th of May. And there is a response from the Pakistani side as well in a few hours. In fact, within a day of Op Sindoor, the 7th of May is when Pakistan strikes back, and India strikes back again.
Yet again, yes.
In broad daylight this time, using suicide drones, attacking their radar installations and military sites. So the first phase of Op Sindoor is you're targeting only the terror infrastructure. In fact, the messaging from Foreign Secretary Misri is very clear that we only attacked terrorist targets. Second phase, the broad daylight strikes, is only military sites. And then Pakistan attacks yet again across the subcontinent, the northern and western borders from Jammu and Kashmir right down to Gujarat. That's 3 Indian border states and 1 union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And then finally, India strikes back on the 9th. A very, very decisive series of strikes attacking Pakistani airfields and air bases and installations, radar sites. It is the biggest, most significant Indian strikes against Pakistan since the 1971 war. In fact, in terms of lethality, I don't even believe we've carried out these strikes, even in the 1971 war, across such a broad frontage. How big is Pakistan, by the way, Colonel Avasthi?
It should be possibly twice the size of California and 3 times the size of Great Britain.
How many in kilometers?
Should be around 1,875 kilometers if you look at in the length part of it.
Right.
And somewhere around 1,200 kilometers. So the strategic depth that the Pakistan has, unfortunately, it is the revenge of geography is quite less.
Right.
As compared to India.
So you're looking at, so for the benefit of our viewers, if Pakistan is as long as the distance between Mumbai and Delhi. About 1,800 kilometers, and the geographical breadth would be half the distance between Mumbai and Delhi. So that's essentially Pakistan.
That's correct.
And so you've hit number of targets, about 11 bases installations in an area, in a geography the size of Mumbai to Delhi, the distance between Mumbai to Delhi, and half that. So that's a very comprehensive.
Without crossing the
international border, very important.
Essence.
Absolutely,
that is the essence.
That's the essence, in fact. And so that's a very unprecedented series of strikes. Now let's just go down and break down this series of strikes, and of course before that, the kind of messaging that India has been sending out all along.
That's correct. Yeah. Now, let me segue you back to 2 decades where Stephen P. Cohen very profoundly said, Pakistan as a country is an entity which speaks to its friends and allies with a gun on its head. It's a very profound statement. Now, doing that, thereafter, what it does is that it escalates a ladder without going into the nitty-gritties of it.
A gun to the head in what sense? I mean, it threatens to commit suicide?
Something like that.
Right.
It's the spoiled child syndrome.
Right,
it's
right. If you don't give me attention, if you don't give me resources or money, I'm going to kill myself. And the jihadis will get hold of the nuclear weapon.
Yes, all of that.
Yeah.
Then any call from the Western world, it feels that, it highlights its, space in the, the geopolitical construct of the world.
Right.
And then, of course, using this delusionary capability, or whatever you may call it, it highlights all its failures into victories. That's exactly the entire Pakistani way.
Since 1947, all
defeats
converted into victory.
It's exactly the way it functions. Now, let's break this down. Now, when you look at what has happened, let's look at it from the lens of the political victory. Let's look at it from the lens of strategic victory. Let's look at it from the lens of military victory.
Right. Let's start with the military victory, since we are talking about airstrikes.
Now, military victory. See, you have been punitive for the first time. You have been able to, most importantly, dissolve that imaginary line of terrorism and the Pakistani army abetting terrorism.
Right.
So in your first drive, you, as I always say, you punished and decimated the notorious 9.
Right.
In the riposte, what followed from Pakistan, you held your ground.
Right.
And in the counter-strike, you told them that if this be the case, then so be it. So you decimated a number of air bases from north to south.
Right.
And those air bases, which one had only heard of while during the service career and saw them, studied them, planned on them. But I think it was fantastic to see what the Indian Armed Forces did it.
Sargodha, Chaklala, Rafiki, Jacobabad. Sargodha and Chaklala are, Colonel Awasthi, I didn't believe we would ever strike it, at least in my lifetime, because these are very, very sensitive air bases. I never tire of telling our viewers that Chaklala. Let's start with Chaklala. Chaklala Air Base. What's the importance of Chaklala Air Base?
The nukes
stored in the hills near Chaklala Air Base, and that's where the vaults are, where the weapons are actually stored in those deep concrete vaults. They began building there a couple of years ago, about a decade ago. Very deep, well-protected sites where the weapons would be kept in a demated situation, and then they would be removed and mated onto all the delivery devices, which is your ballistic missiles and aircraft. Air bases which were struck, Colonel Awasthi. The first one is, of course, Chaklala Air Base, which is now known as Air Marshal Noor Khan Air Base.
Oh, yes.
Renamed after the second PAF chief. Now, I've been to Chaklala Air Base.
Oh, wow.
2010, was part of an official delegation which involved the foreign minister's visit, SM Krishna then. So I remember, landing on Chaklala, and it was a first for me, possibly first and possibly the last visit to Chaklala. But it's a very enormously significant air base. So what's the significance of Chaklala?
It's the nukes. So that is one. The second part is, if you see the targeting of the air bases, which has been done from, let's look at it from north to south. They look at all strategic air bases. They are the same air bases which have been used by Pakistan in most of the conflicts. So that itself in messaging is that whether you do something which is punitive to us,
Right.
we will not strike you hard, we will strike you deep.
Deep. That's
The
important.
whole importance is that
Yeah.
we will not only strike you hard, we will strike you deep. Now, this is the very, very important thing. Now, let's break it down insofar as, the political part is concerned. First, then we'll come down
So
to
the military.
Okay,
We'll
so the
just quickly
military,
wrap up the
military
Chaklala
part.
base. I mean, Chaklala is of course GHQ Rawalpindi.
Yes.
That's where all your VIP transports are parked, all their Gulf streams and bombardiers. And if Asim Munir were to flee the country, he'd fly out of Chaklala
Hopefully.
air base. But that's also where the enablers are. Their transport aircraft, their fuelers.
It's a command center.
tankers.
It's
like
a nerve center.
Nerve center. And most importantly, the headquarters, the Strategic Plans Division, the SPD. That's the importance also of Chaklala. You've been very circumspect in talking about it, but Chaklala's importance is that it's a nerve center. It is GHQ Rawalpindi's airbase.
Yes.
That's very close to it. So let's go to Sargodha now. Sargodha is the next airbase. This has been on the radar of every single nuclear weapons researcher for 4 decades?
4 decades, minimum.
And what is it that is the importance of Sargodha? Those hills. Let's talk about those hills.
Kirana Hills?
The Kirana Hill.
Of course.
Kirana Hills compound nuclear weapons storage site of the Pakistan military. And that's where they keep their bombs, of course, in a demated condition. And those bombs will be taken out of their storage sites, moved towards the airbase and loaded onto their aircraft or their nuclear weapons, the ballistic missiles or their cruise missiles or what have you. But the significance of India striking at these two very key air bases, what are you conveying? What's the message that you're sending up?
The message is that we'll strike hard, we will strike deep, and we'll strike it well.
Right. And we're not worried about your nuclear weapons.
It's not a question of, let's go back to the previous podcast.
Yeah.
Where we discussed very clearly, there exists a very important space between that nuclear overhang and prosecuting conventional operations. Yeah. So we will utilize that space by our own expertise, by our own firepower, by our own acumen, and you see the result is in front of you.
So that's the podcast that you must watch, folks. The last one that I did with Colonel Avasthi spoke about nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism, Pakistan's NWET strategy, and how India's exploring the space below the nuclear threshold. And we spoke about how we had to thank General Pervez Musharraf for...
He gave us that space, clearly.
He showed us, he indicated to us, yes, there is a lot of space below the nuclear threshold. And that is precisely where the Prime Minister Modi and the NSA, Doval and the services and their chiefs and the CDS have all decided to explore that space below the nuclear threshold. So very big politico-military signaling to Pakistan. Not only, as you mentioned, that we can strike hard, we can strike deep, but we can also target the rungs of your nuclear ladder.
Absolutely.
Do you think that that's what triggered off the panic in Pakistan? With
it could be. Now there are more lessons. When you look at it, when you look at the neighborhood, suddenly I think a lot of people in the neighborhood have realized that India means business.
You mean Nobel laureates as well?
All of them. All of them.
Right.
Now, when you look at the changing nature of warfighting, you would realize that as in difference to various conflicts which have been fought in the subcontinent in the last around 45, 50 years, 55 years maybe. The methodology of utilization of the timelines between an incident, which was grave, and the general mobilization or moving out for war or issuing of warning order has changed. So this entire spectrum has now been taken over by long-range vectors, loitering munitions, and drones.
Very important observation, Colonel Avasthi. And of course, this is why the reason I keep coming back to you. The fact is that you're saying that we're going from land-based retaliatory measures like the military, the Indian Army, which you were part of Parakram, and you're moving to an aerial system of vector delivery, the Air Force. So drones, long-range missiles, air-to-ground munitions, and the like.
So while the distinction between an incident and your response was essentially in the previous past dotted with various actions which are non-kinetic.
Right.
they have now turned kinetic.
They have turned kinetic, and I think the OODA loop has shortened dramatically.
Tremendously.
Right. So,
Tremendously.
why don't you explain to our viewers what the OODA loop really is?
OODA loop essentially is observe, orient, decide, and act. So the shorter the OODA loop,
Right.
the faster you make a decision.
Right.
The faster you make a decision, the faster you deliver purpose.
Right.
The faster you deliver purpose, you decide the ordnance. And the faster you decide the ordnance, the faster you strike.
So, in layman's terms, how would you explain OODA loop? Give us an example of how it works.
An incident has happened. You have observed it.
Right.
You've oriented towards it as to how are you going to be tackling it.
Yes.
What are the timelines? What are you going to do? How will we utilize the instruments of national power in terms of kinetic and non-kinetic measures? You decide what is to be done and act accordingly in a timeline that you've decided. That's exactly what you've done.
If I were to look at it this way, in a fight, you're looking at someone throwing a punch at you, and in the past you're saying that the retaliatory punch would be delivered over weeks,
a little larger,
much later, and now the punch goes back almost immediately.
Oh yes, not only that, it's not only that punch going back immediately. It is you have learned to roll with the punches.
Right. Interesting.
That is the most important.
Roll with the punches. So you're saying that the briefing that we heard the DGMOs give, they were asked about losses. They were asked about aircraft losses.
Yes.
And what is the response? Interesting. Everyone wants to know how many aircraft India lost and how many we shot down across the border. But
our job is to nullify and decimate targets. We don't use our resources, time and energy to check body bags.
Right.
And that I think it says it all. Whether you have to roll with the punches. Why go into numerics?
Right. So this is very significant. You've reduced the OODA loop, you've shortened the OODA loop, your response times have gone up. And as you've seen over the 3 phases of Sindoor, the first phase, of course, was targeting the terror infrastructure. And within a matter of hours, you responded to Pakistan's response, this so-called swift retort. And then you went after him for those several nights of drone warfare that he waged against you. You knocked out his frontline air bases, including his nuclear sites and places where he would mobilize his nuclear vectors.
Correct.
So big signaling over here. But, now moving from the military to the political messages of Sindoor.
Right. Now, the political messaging of Sindoor is very profound. Firstly, Sindoor as a name itself is very, very pronounced. The second thing is it has very clearly given out the red line of Sindoor. There are some red lines which can't be crossed.
Right.
The third part is it has shown deep political resolve. Political resolve that, look, if the push has to come to a shove, then so be it.
Right.
The fourth part is, if you look at the UN Security Council, we saw and we spoke last time that the UN Security Council was in session and they were wanting to take out the the resolution, and somebody was wanting to veto it, and somebody inserted some other words who said that the TRF is not a part of the resolution. All of that.
Right.
Now, did India wait for the resolution of the United Nations Security Council, or did it go running to the UNSC to tell them that, look, this is what has happened, help us? No. So what does this tell you? It shows this is India of 2025.
Right.
And the most important part is that the United Nations now needs reforms.
It needs reforms.
You are speaking with the 4th largest economy in the world. If that is not a part of your Security Council calculus, there is something massively wrong.
There is something wrong with the UNSC. But I'm going to keep that for another day, that discussion. But tell us about the new red line that Sindoor has drawn for Pakistan.
The new red line which Sindoor has drawn, Sandeep, for Pakistan is very clear. It has come out in the stated Indian policy. It says, and I quote, any act of terror will be viewed as an act of war. Now, how profound is that?
Break it down for us. Any act of terror will be seen as an act of war.
Yes.
Does that mean that what we saw on that May 11th briefing by the tri-services, that the armed forces are now going to be used to counter threats terror attacks against Indian infrastructure, civilians, and military personnel?
Yes, absolutely. Any act of terror can be understood very clearly.
Right.
Now, the initial part was that you would essentially look at any act of terror by the Indian polity, Indian military, or Indian bureaucracy to be discussed and be responded to in terms of the same vectoring, what is to be done. Are we looking at a proportionate response?
Right.
Are we doing this? Are we looking at the world powers in sight? Now this says you have to kill a fly with a sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer, absolutely.
It's as simple as that. That's what it means.
And also the messaging from the Air Force, which said that we are going to, the operation has been called off.
Yes.
And it continues, which means that Op Sindoor, you think, is going to be the default setting to respond to acts of terror now?
It's the new normal.
It's the new
As I
normal.
mentioned to you very clearly, what is ceasefire? This is no ceasefire.
That's not a ceasefire.
This is an arrangement.
Right.
It is not an agreement. Have you
Right.
signed somewhere on the dotted line? Nowhere. So it's an arrangement. It is essentially telling a spoiled child, as long as you behave yourself,
Yes.
damn good. If you don't, then possibly be ready to get slapped, you as it has got slapped quite well.
Right.
And the next time around, possibly the slap will be harder in intensity.
Right. No, and also this other messaging of telling the Pakistan military that, for decades you've tried to bleed India through
Yes.
this war of 1,000 cuts. It can't be a low-cost option anymore. The kind of damage that India has inflicted on Pakistan in 72 hours,
Yes.
unprecedented,
Yes.
not since 1971.
Yes.
Do you think it conveys to Pakistan that terror cannot be a low-cost option anymore?
Yes, as I mentioned before, Sandeep, if you
Right.
recall, in the first part of the military, lessons, is that famous fine thin line between terrorism and the back end of terrorism,
Right.
or the handlers of terrorism,
Yeah.
or the perpetrators of terrorism who are in hand and glove,
Yeah.
which is the Pakistani army. That line has dissolved.
And when you're striking at the Pakistan military, something we've never done, again, I must repeat that we've not struck at the Pakistan military in over half a century.
Oh yes.
54 years. Now, the costs, I mean, if Asim Munir is sitting with his accountant, what do you think the costs have been to Pakistan in terms of radar sites hit, the airfields, air bases hit, the ammo dumps hit, all of that? You think it'd be over $1 billion?
Should be. I think he should be able to cover it with the new IMF loan which he's taking. This is the 24th tranche a country is taking.
24th tranche.
24th tranche of an IMF loan.
Well, living from hand
with $130 billion external debt.
You just imagine that. So this you have countries and people living from hand to mouth, and here is a country that's living on hand to hand out.
Absolutely.
So do you think it creates a kind of dilemma in his mind that $1 billion that is going to come in, is he going to use it to repair his busted radar sites and his air bases and buy new aircraft and those Chinese missiles, or he's going to feed his people or hopefully invest in something that's going to be a little more productive for his people, you think?
Let's see what is Munir's future first.
Right.
Is he going to be hanging around, or he's
Right.
going to be moving out?
Right.
Now there are various options in sight. Munir still holds the baton, and does what he has to as a delusional gentleman.
Yeah.
The second option is that the civilian leadership takes over, as we discussed earlier.
Right.
Imran Khan is still around.
Yes.
And he has massive fan following
Right.
in Pakistan. The third thing is, how do they now convert it into a social victory for people as a face-saving grace?
Spin it out as a victory.
Spin it out as a
But they've
victory.
been doing it all the time. Since
As I
1971.
mentioned,
Everything is a victory in Pakistan. Pakistan army is never defeated.
Never. But it's good. It's nice that they spin this narrative. And,
Yes.
They do whatever they do.
So they lose half their country, they spin it out as a victory. They lose, 93,000 Pakistanis are captured.
Oh, yes.
2 entire divisions are rounded up and they're POW camps for 2 years. Spun as a victory. Everything is a victory.
Oh, you look at the DGISPR. I mean, his name is Sharif and Chaudhry. It's an oxymoron. He's neither Sharif nor Chaudhry. You know what I mean?
But it's interesting that DGISPR, Lieutenant General Chaudhry, Did you know he was the son of Sultan Bashiruddin?
Of course. The UN sanctioned terrorist.
I mean, this is unbelievable. Which country in the world would you have a nuclear scientist who's hobnobbing with Al Qaeda, who's been designated a global terrorist,
True,
and whose son becomes
the
military
face of PR.
spokesperson, the face of the Pakistan military,
Yes.
absolutely sitting out and giving out all those briefings and messages and talking about how the Pakistan army is all about jihad and all of that. I mean, this is bizarre. I mean,
And the first one from a non-combat arm, he's from EME. He's neither from armor or infantry or artillery or whatever.
In that jihadi mindset, sheltering terrorists, nuclear weapons, the only two strategic assets that Pakistan really has, this military, which has non-state actors, the so-called terrorists, which they call non-state actors, but they are actually state actors. And the other is, of course, the nuclear weapons, and that how they melded the two together for NWT, which we discussed in the last podcast. But
True.
Colonel Abbasi, look ahead for us and tell us what lies in store. The smoking ruins of the air bases in Pakistan, a humiliated Pakistan military which has stood by and watched as its air bases in Pakistan's Punjab province have been struck. And India which has said enough is enough. Very big politico-military signaling using Op Sindoor. What does the future hold in the next couple of months? You think there is going to be another terror attack, say like Kaluchak? You can never trust Pakistan, can you?
You can never trust Pakistan. My sense tells me that you may have won the battle, but the war is still pending. It's still on the horizon. So as there's this famous quote in Latin which says "Si vis pacem para bellum," which means if you want peace, prepare for war.
If you want peace, prepare for war.
It's as simple as that, because it has been a national humiliation. It's been a national shame, especially of being hit firstly of the the terror factories all the way, not only in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir but also in mainland Punjab.
Right.
Thereafter, you have got into hitting his important 9 or 11 bases, air bases, which are also very, very close to its nuclear facilities, which has given him a very stern message that somewhere down the line, you now can't mess around.
Right.
But then my sense tells me Pakistan, see Sandeep, Pakistan is a cauldron not only of the Pakistan army, not a, unkempt political system. It thrives on non-state actors.
Yes.
The non-state actors are, mental mercenaries.
Right.
So you just can't predict. The whole problem about any non-state actors is predictability.
Right.
So me telling something to you that, we have reached a great impasse. He's been given a great stern message. He will behave himself. He will no longer be a spoiled child. He will not hide behind a nuclear umbrella. He will not run to the Western powers to save him. He will not, be very, very attuned to Turkey and China for his weapon systems and, aid and all of that. All this is academic, because this may not be dictated by neither the polity nor the military. What about the non-state actors? The non-state actors are the only ones who possibly run the show, the deep state.
Well, in this case, I would argue that the non-state actors aren't non-state anymore. And that photograph where you have Pakistani generals standing side by side with designated terrorists, the mask has fallen off, as we've discussed in the past.
It's so demeaning for a military officer to attend a funeral of a terrorist.
But then that's the oxymoron. The military officer and the terrorists, are there distinctions between the two?
Hardly
I think those lines have been blurred as well. But important takeaways from you, Colonel Abbasi, as always, if you want peace, prepare for war. And what an outstanding performance by the Indian military. Once again, all the three services rose to the occasion when called to provide and present options, and a political leadership that was not afraid to try call Pakistan's bluff, and then press home the advantage and declare victory.
So, Sandeep, it has been politically sterling. militarily astute, well coordinated, very well joint manship in terms of the operations which have been prosecuted. In terms of the messaging, the strategic messaging, the messaging is very clear to the neighborhood as well as to the world that if the push has to come to a shove, we will not look over our shoulder to take permission from somebody. Most importantly, if you see the entire concept of war fighting, even in the Pakistan army, has undergone a change. If you look at Operation Bunyan ul Masroor, which essentially means a wall of lead, the name itself says that you are putting him into a defensive mindset.
Right.
Well, your famous wall of lead has been penetrated.
Famous wall of lead has been penetrated. Lots of lessons there. We'll get you where you are, irrespective of whether you have nuclear weapons or no. India has indicated a new set of red lines for Pakistan and raised the costs of Pakistan's low-cost option of sponsoring terror against India. Terror against India is no longer a low-cost option. We've raised the costs for it. Thank you very much, Colonel Awasthi, for joining us and throwing light on Operation Sindoor. We'll keep coming back to you for updates on this evolving situation.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you very much.